So if you are human, you have energy. Energy is what you share and give out to the world. Now, when I talk about energy, I see it in 4 dimensions. Fastest way to increase my energetic state immediately. So I think the traditional path is not as necessary today as it may have once been.
What is my purpose here today?
For many of us, that first step is very hard because we're filled with insecurities, doubts, and fears. But when you take that first step and you create momentum, I need to eat better, I'm going to go on a diet. These are all physical energy traits. But unless we also focus on mental, emotional, and spiritual energy, what happened?
What inspired you and made you think like this is something I enjoy the most and I'm going to start?
What are the things that come naturally to me that perhaps don't come as naturally to other people? We as humans, we tend to overcomplicate it because we think that the answer can't be simple. I just have to do this and it will work out. So we look for something more complicated. And then what happens is we pile all of this knowledge on top of us, and now we're lost as to what the way forward is. We read this book and this philosophy and that philosophy, and we say, wait.
Before we get started with today's podcast, I have a small favor to ask. 95% of you guys watching have not subscribed yet. In order to help me bring on bigger guests, if you've learned anything from any of my podcast episodes, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Simon, thank you so much for joining me on an episode of the Inkspired Mind podcast. It's lovely to have you, and I'm already feeling the energy from you vibrating towards me. I want to start this podcast directly going into your journey so we can learn about you and the viewers or listeners who are listening and understand who you are.
So I was born in a town called Dartford in Kent in the southeast of England to 2 Malaysian Chinese parents who had emigrated here for a better life. And I remember when I was growing up, I was one of only a small handful of Chinese students. Even when I got to my secondary school, I was one of 7 students, not just in my year, but the entire school.
Wow.
And it's funny because when I was back at that school recently giving a talk to the sixth form, I look at the sixth form and there's so much diversity. There's people from all walks of life. And it's incredible how that school has changed since I was last there. Now, during the years that I attended, this was pre-internet, pre-mobile phones. There was a lot of focus on academics. Within my family, which was a very strict Chinese household, it was, Simon, do well in class, get good grades, get to a good university, and get a good job. And then you will be successful. Now, success was defined by one of 4 things: be a banker, be a lawyer, be a doctor, or be an accountant. Now, I didn't really like lots of numbers, so being an accountant was out of the window. I didn't like cutting things open, so I didn't want to be a doctor. And law just felt pretty boring to me. And so I was left with the banking route. And what helped is the fact that I grew up watching films like Wall Street, Boiler Room, and similar films like that. And so there was the attraction of not just this being a viable career route, but also because it paid well. So I went to study economics at the LSE, the London School of Economics, graduated in the middle of 2007 at what was probably the worst time to begin in the financial industry, because this was a year before the global financial crisis. And to make things a little more interesting, the company that I started with was Lehman Brothers, which collapsed 14 months after I joined. Now, for anybody who has gone through redundancy or restructuring within a company where your job is at risk, you know it is a very painful experience. It was the same for me because I had these hopes and dreams that I would move up the ladder, I would get a promotion, and then maybe at some point down the line, I would decide what I wanted to do with my life. Unfortunately, I had to face those questions a lot earlier. Even though I would be in and out of jobs within the financial industry for nearly a decade, that experience kickstarted a thought process in my head where I was asking myself, if I worked for someone, my destiny would always be out of my hands. Whereas if I started to work for myself, yes, it would be painful, there would be challenges, there would be obstacles, but a lot of my destiny would now be in my hands. And so I asked myself 2 simple questions, which few of us actually spend time to reflect on. The first was, what did success mean to me? And the second was, what sort of impact did I want to have in the world? Now, these two questions are important. The first question, what did success mean to me? If we look around us, what we observe is that most of us are exhausted, not because we are doing too much, but because firstly, we are doing too little of the things that bring us joy. And second, we are often running someone else's race.
Yes.
We are living up to someone else's definition of success, and we are measuring our progress against metrics determined by someone else. So once we have clarity of what is most important, then we have the motivation and energy to make things happen. Second, what sort of impact did I want to have in this world? This question is important because our value as humans is determined by how much more we have given to the world than we have taken from it. This is all about legacy. How do you want to be remembered? How will you impact other people's lives? How will you be part of their stories? And so once I had these answers on paper, the challenge for me was to then build my life around those answers. And that is what led to what I now get to do today. I have had the opportunity to coach some incredible clients, from CEOs to corporate executives to entrepreneurs, celebrities, creatives such as Michelin star chefs, to speak at some wonderful stages, companies like Meta, Google, Adobe, EY, and conferences across the planet. And in April 2020, when the world was going into lockdown and I became a father for the first time, I also landed the opportunity to write my first book, Energize, with the world's biggest publishing house, Penguin. And that was an utter dream come true. To have gone from being employed to running my own business and then having the opportunity to share my journey in a book.
I love that. I love your story of like coming from the traditional path to going into your self-discovery journey and then giving your knowledge in a form of book. And it's kind of just a journey everyone wishes for as well. But I want to kind of go into the path where the traditional path, and that's what most people still till date are following. What do you think is the problem with that path, and why is that sucking people's energy so much?
Sure. So I guess when I think about it, it is not so much that the traditional path is a problem, because for a lot of people, they might like what they do. You might be in a job that you actually like, and maybe becoming an entrepreneur does not suit you. You're not someone who is comfortable taking risk. You prefer to be in a team environment. So there are people who are doing a traditional role that works for them. I think the problem comes when you see that as the only option. And I think that's where the problem arises. When I grew up, I saw that as the only option purely because no one in my immediate family had started their own business or grew that to become a success. And so that was the only route I knew. And of course, if everyone around you only knows that route, then that's what they share with you as the right path to take. So I think the problem is the fact that many of us can be very narrow-minded as to one path being the only path. What we have to understand is that that is only one of many paths that we can take. Yes, you can go down the traditional route if that is what you want to do. And in some cases, you have no choice. If you want to become a doctor, you have to go to medical school. You have to get the practical experience. You have to follow a certain pathway in order to become a qualified doctor. However, if your ambitions lie elsewhere, there are many different ways that you can still arrive at your destination that does not necessarily involve going down the traditional route. These days, we have access to courses that are free online. No matter your age, you can hop onto a website, you can learn a course, you can pick up skills, and you can apply them immediately. So I think the traditional path is not as necessary today as it may have once been.
Yeah, I like that so much. And I think having options just allows you to kind of see that there is more to life than just working at a 9-to-5 job. And in the business world, I think in 2020, there was a lot of tension that, you're doing a 9-to-5, leaving 9-to-5. But now people are kind of understanding that 9-to-5 is good for you if you like it. If you don't like it, then you can move out. There were 2 questions you asked yourself, and those 2 questions are not easy to answer. What is success to you, and what impact you want to make to the world? In order to ask those questions, what does one have to go through for that self-discovery? Because as I said, it's not simple to just say, what does success mean to me? And what impact do I want to make? Because first you have to know yourself deep down to answer those questions as well.
Very well said. First of all, true wisdom begins with knowing ourselves. And I'm a big believer that you cannot have self-development without self-awareness. And the process of asking these sort of questions is really to deepen your awareness about yourself. What does success mean to you? Well, when we start to ask ourselves that question, we start to look ahead into the future. We start to think about our own legacy. We start to think about who we are as a person. The reason few of us get time to think about it is we're so busy working on it for other people. When you start a job, you are told this project will be a success when. You will get the promotion when. But all of these decisions are not yours to own. These are determined by people outside of you. And so to take time to really charter that journey from the head to the heart, if you will, allows you to really understand what is most important. Once you begin to know what is most important to you, you awaken the greatest source of energy that there is available. There was this quote that the Indian philosopher Patanjali wrote, where he said, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitation. Your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself to be in a new, great, and wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents awaken, and you see yourself to be far greater than you ever imagined. And that's the power of what happens when you know personally what success means to you. And the answer will be very, very personal. You know, to some people, success is being a great parent. To others, success is creating a business that impacts other people's lives. For others, it's launching a fantastic new course that makes a lot of money and impacts people at the same time. Now, the thing about understanding what success means to you is that this does not have to be rigid. Your version of success will and can change over time. To give an example, what I thought was success before I was a parent has certainly changed. Now I am a parent. Because life does evolve, life does go through changes. But the thing is, you need a starting point. If you have no focus, you have no context for today's actions. And the way I like to think about it is there needs to be a balance between macro perspective and micro actions.
I like that. I like that macro and then micro perspective. And the way you answered that, and when you went to the path of being inspired by something, and then you can kind of identify your success and what impact you want to make. And I think that inspiration is, you find that inspiration from your purpose. What is your purpose in life? When I went through my process of finding my purpose, I used a concept of Ikigai. I'm sure you heard of it, which was a kind of not really finding my purpose. And I still don't know if I have found my purpose or not, because I feel like one, purpose may change, just like you, as you mentioned about success. But for someone just starting off to figure out these questions in life, like what is my purpose here today? How do they go through that kind of little journey to identify?
First of all, and it's going to sound paradoxical, to find your purpose, you don't focus on finding your purpose. Here's why. Because a lot of people I speak to say to me, Simon, I will start this thing when I know what my purpose is. And so what happens is we use it as an excuse. Because I don't know what my purpose is, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. And then what happens is you end up doing something you hate for so many years, and then you are filled with regrets.
Yeah.
The fact is, nobody wakes up one morning knowing exactly what their purpose is. Yes, if you're watching a Hollywood film, it may happen in a film, but it's not going to happen in reality.
Yep.
If we wait until we know what our purpose is, it is a very heavy question.
Yeah.
What is my purpose? Well, nobody will know straight away. So in order to discover your purpose, you actually shift the focus away from what is my purpose to what am I most curious about right now.
Love that.
And it's a lot softer. Now, we can easily answer, what am I most curious about right now? You can say, right now I'm curious about videos. I'm curious about speaking. I'm curious about starting a business. I'm curious about building my online presence. There's a lot of things that we're curious about. So we can start to create this map, if you will, of the things that we are going to explore in the present. Now, once you start exploring your curiosity, and there is always wisdom in what we are curious about, it opens the pathway to the next step. You start in one path and suddenly more paths start to open.
Yeah.
And as you continue to follow those breadcrumbs of curiosities, it will eventually lead you to what your purpose is.
That's a really nice way to think. It's like in business that you can't know everything about a business until you start a business as well. Sort of, not exactly like that, but kind of just you have to begin with something in order to identify what your purpose is. I think I done it completely the other way around when I first got started.
And I think a good analogy to reflect on when we think about this is that if you think about your life as a map or a guide, when you begin on a journey, you never get given the entire map up front. I mean, life would be boring if you already knew the map and the path towards where you wanted to be. All you get given is a starting point. You're like, okay, this is step one. But what happens is that when you commit to taking that first step, and often for many of us, that first step is very hard because we're filled with insecurities, doubts, and fears. But when you take that first step and you create momentum, now when I talk about momentum, it is that I am going places feeling. Now, you will know what that feels like at different points in your life. There were moments when you felt like I'm going places. Now, once you get that behind you, what happens is more of that map starts to open up. More of that map starts to unravel itself. And then you can see what the next step is, then the next step and the next step. And for me, that is the beautiful part of life, is the magic of the unknown, is that you've got to take steps forward in order to understand what comes next.
I like the analogy because it also inspires me in the sense that when I first started my journey, I had to take the first step and the second step. By the way, sorry guys, my throat, I don't know why, it's just drying up so quick. But that analogy really I think it will hit with many people because many people are stuck and they are like, I want to get started, but they are thinking of the end goal and not taking the first step. Now, one thing in my mind is that when someone wants to, especially in my audience, their business and they want to start a business. But I think what happens is when I started my first business, it didn't align with my purpose. So you already answered how you find the purpose, but how do you make sure that if you do start a business, it aligns with your actual purpose as well? Because sometimes most people end up starting a business that they're making money with, but it doesn't fulfill them. And that happened with me as well. And then sometimes you're so late in your journey that you're like, if I close this all, I have to start from square one.
Sure, but even if something doesn't align to your purpose immediately, remember, we don't always know what our purpose is straight away. I have no doubt that you will have taken many lessons from it.
That's true.
And when you look back at your journey, and I've had failed businesses as well. I mean, starting what I do today wasn't my immediate business. I was involved in 2 or 3 businesses before I started coaching, speaking, and writing. And those businesses didn't work out for whatever reason. But I'm still glad I did them, even if they didn't align to my purpose, because at the time I was curious about them. So to give an example, one of them was a dining experience business. So people could book tickets to dine in somebody's home. You would meet strangers and you would connect over food, kind of like Airbnb, but for food lovers. Now, that was a doomed model for a number of reasons. But I gained so many lessons from that experience that I was able to take those lessons and bring it into my next business and so on. And so when we do decide what businesses to start, I think curiosity and learning is important. What am I most curious about? Does this business allow me to test that curiosity? And will this opportunity teach me something? Now, if they teach you something and it is aligned to what you're curious about right now, great. You cannot know ahead of time if that business, 1, is going to succeed, and 2, if it is going to be connected or contributing to your purpose. We just don't know. It's like going on holiday to a hotel you've never been in before. You just don't know what it's going to be like staying at a hotel until you get there. Once you're there, then you know, oh, this is a fantastic hotel, or we should have chosen a different one. But you never know until you arrive.
I like that. And I think the whole perspective it shifts your perspective as well to just not wanting to start a business that will align with your purpose and just going for it. What you said, you failed few businesses. What inspired you to actually become a life coach? Because even right now, there is not many people who will be like, my career is becoming a life coach from now on, or even in a form of business that I'm going to start a business of being a life coach. What inspired you and made you think like, this is something I enjoy the most and I'm going to start?
Sure. So when I failed my final business before I started on this journey, I remember pausing for a bit and then asking myself, well, what are the things that come naturally to me that perhaps don't come as naturally to other people? And I remember my girlfriend at the time, she said to me, Simon, I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of people seem to come to you when they've got a challenge or they've got a big decision to make or they're going through a tough time in their life. My first thought when she told me that was, isn't that just being a good friend? I thought that was just being a good friend. And I I never understood if I could make a career out of it. Could I make money from this? Could I turn this into a business? So I decided to go to this 2-day event. There was a 2-day event going on in London, and it was an introduction to coaching as a skill, but also a career. And I went in with zero expectations. I just thought, I'm not paying for this. It's a free event, and the only thing I'm going to lose is my time. By the end of that 2-day event, I said to myself, how am I going to start doing this? Because I need to start this. I was so excited about using this skill in a more professional capacity that I signed within weeks of the event. And I was pursuing this qualification on the side of my 9-to-5 at the time. Okay. And so it took me 2.5 years to complete the qualification. The challenge after that was, what did I do with it? I got qualified now. What am I going to do with this? And that would take me another couple of years before I had the courage to hand in my resignation and go, I'm going to build this full time. I'm going to put all of my energy into making this happen. And the reason I say it took me a couple of years, and I use the word courage, is because what I've discovered is that leap out of employment into entrepreneurship is not an easy one. Yep. It is not an easy leap. On the outside, it looks easy. Somebody just handed in a resignation, they're starting their business, and they're going to grow it. But the mental journey is really tough, because the mindset has to go through a transition from thinking like an employee to thinking like an entrepreneur. And so for me, there was a lot of risk. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I had a very strict family, and for them, it was all about results. And I didn't feel they would understand the choice I would make, taking a leap of faith into the world of entrepreneurship. But if there's anything I've learned, is that there are always two sales that happen, whether you are in business or whether you are in employment. And that is, the second sale is selling you to others. The first is selling you to you. And until you can sell you to you, the second will always remain a challenge. And so the moment I started to see myself as a coach, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO of my business, that is when big things started to happen.
It's the mindset shift you need in order for you to actually become that person. It's just like you manifesting your future self into existence. Yeah. And without that, it's impossible. And there was a special word you used. There was, I wanted to put all my energy into becoming a life coach. You have an entire book called Energize, and it's a huge topic in my opinion. And we had a slight brief conversation off camera as well. Why is energy the most important topic for a human being? Or if not one of the most important?
For me, it is one of the most important because it is who we are. If we look at different cultures, for example, in the Maori culture, they call it mana. In yoga, they call it prana. In my Chinese culture, they call it chi. If you are a fan of the Star Wars film franchise, they call it the Force. Now, whatever we describe it as or name it as, we're talking about the same thing, which is energy as a life force. So if you are human, you have energy. Energy is what you share and give out to the world. Now, when I talk about energy, I see it in 4 dimensions. And this just helps me to explain it to people who have not come across energy as a concept. The first dimension of energy is physical. The second is mental. The third is emotional. And the fourth is spiritual. Now, when we think about energy, we often focus purely on the physical because it's the most obvious. Yeah. When we begin a new year, most New Year's resolutions are focused on physical energy. I am going to sign up to the gym. I'm going to get fitter. I need to have more space in my diary. I need to eat better. I'm going to go on a diet. These are all physical energy traits. But unless we also focus on mental, emotional, and spiritual energy, what happens is we are going to have an energy deficit. We might not be aware of it in the present moment, but at some point it will hit us in the face. So, for example, spiritual energy, when you are low on spiritual energy, you know, it's a feeling. Again, you can't describe it, but it is a feeling. So you may experience tension in your stomach. When you are doing a job or work that is not aligned to who you are, when you have decided to do something that goes against your values, you have a bit of tension inside you. When you are high on spiritual energy, you are in a so-called state of flow, because what you are doing is an extension of who you are. You have this opportunity to express your innate skills, gifts, and talents. That is when you're high on spiritual energy. Mental energy is your ability to focus on what matters. It's your ability to access your creativity. This is all to do with mental energy. Emotional energy is about how you relate to yourself, how you relate to others, and more importantly, how you respond to events out of your control. That is all to do with emotional energy.
I love that, the 4 dimensions of energy, because in my head it was just like energy is one thing, but there are actually different parts of energy as well. How would you go ahead to increase your energy in each of these dimensions? Because it is different for each of them, and you've spoken about in the book, but I want to just share this with the actual people as well.
Sure. So we can dive quite deep into all of them, but to give one example to the audience, I'm often asked, Simon, what is the fastest way to increase my energetic state immediately? Now, apart from going to the gym and doing a workout, which is guaranteed to elevate your energetic state, the next best thing is what I call a 3-step process summarized by gratitude with intention. Now, a lot of people talk about gratitude, but for me, I want to add 2 words to the end. Is gratitude with intention. It's being intentional with how you express gratitude. So the first step is to write down the name of somebody that you can be grateful for right now. It could be a partner, a colleague, a family, a close friend. Second step is to write down why did you choose that person in as much detail as you can. And this step is important. So you want to go into detail such as, what has he or she done for you? How have they supported you? What would life be like if they were not present, or they did not do the thing that they did to help you in that moment? Once you've got that written down, the third step is where the magic happens in terms of elevating our energetic state. The third step is to pick up your phone, call that person, and read out step 2. Now, if you feel uncomfortable doing that final step, at a minimum, what you want to do is to record a voice note and to send it to that person. Why? Because our voice carries energy. If you simply send a text message or an email or a letter, the recipient has to make up what your energetic state was when you put that together. They don't know what your emotion was like. But when you convey that message through voice, there is emotion in our voice. People can feel that and receive that. And that's why at a minimum, you should send a voice note. So that is a powerful activity that people can do right now to immediately elevate their energetic state.
I love that, because the part where you added gratitude with intentions, because most people are always like, I can't feel gratitude. Every time I'm trying to be grateful for something, I just don't feel it. And I think with intention and doing something about it adds something. What's your favorite way in terms of well, you talk about mindful and meditation, but to elevate your kind of mental energy, what's some of your favorite ways which you do on a daily basis?
Sure. So aside from the obvious, which is meditation, I think one of the most powerful activities that I do on a regular basis, which really helps to address, I would say specifically, mental and emotional energy, is the act of journaling. Is the act of downloading what is in your head onto paper. So few of us actually spend time writing our thoughts onto paper. What happens when you don't do this activity is your brain starts to think about your thinking, about your thinking, about your thinking. And it gets so caught up here that you just don't take any action on the things you know you must put into action. And so when you download your thoughts onto paper, number 1, your mind feels a lot lighter.
Yes.
Number 2, you can start to organize your thoughts into some order so you know what the best step forward is. And that is why I remember going to a Richard Branson event when he was launching his book, Finding My Virginity. And one of the questions he was asked is, Richard, what one tip would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs that has had a huge impact on you and your journey? And he reached into his jacket pocket and he pulled out a black notebook and a pen. And he said, make sure you are always carrying a notebook and pen with you, because you never know that from a conversation you might have at the airport, from a magazine you might read on public transport, from a conversation you have with a stranger, what ideas and insights you get. And if you don't journal those things down and write them down onto paper, you will very quickly forget them. And so he said that single habit has had a profound impact on the ideas I would then able to apply in the business world.
Yeah. I mean, there's a study as well that in a day, a person has like 50,000 plus thoughts as well. And I learned this another thing from Ali Abdul, that your mind is for having ideas, not holding them, or something along those lines. I journal myself, and I've been consistent, except this week, for the last 90 plus days. And it's really helped me to kind of, right at the start of the day, take everything from my brain to put it on a piece of paper. But when someone starts journaling, especially when me, I'm just writing everything that comes in my brain. But is there a specific way you journal and specific things you add in your journal?
Sure. Well, the first thing to share is there is no right or wrong way. I think sometimes the belief that there is a right way can stop many of us journaling.
Exactly.
So I've spoken to some friends of mine and they said, I don't know if I'm journaling right. So I stopped. And I want to ask a lot of people what the best way to journal is. It's like going to, it's like going to address your health and you're saying, well, I'm not going to go to the gym or work out yet because I need to get the right workout clothes. I need to get the right trainer. I need to get the right gym. I need to make sure I can afford it. Where if you put all of these barriers and friction in place, you're never going to start. And so for me, it's simply to start the easiest way possible. Now, for some people, it might be prompts. Well, you can go into Google, you can search journal prompts, and you'll get lots of links to questions that you can just go, oh, I like that question.
Yeah.
I'm going to start collecting questions that I can use as prompts. It could be something as simple as at the end of each week, you ask yourself, what went well for you this week? Just start there. What went well for you? Start documenting your life. And then as you get more comfortable with that, you might throw in some other questions such as, what could I be most proud of this week? How will I know next week would have been a productive week? And then you start having fun with those questions. And then you can move on to free flow writing. Whatever's in your mind, just download it straight onto paper and then edit after.
Yeah.
So that's a technique that was shared by Julia Cameron, which is called morning pages. Every morning when you wake up, get a sheet of A4 paper and just simply download whatever is on your mind. So there's no right or wrong way. It's simply to work out what works best for you now and start, and you'll find the best way as you move forward.
I love that so much because I, not even in journaling, but even other aspects like meditation, especially, there are many types of meditations out there. And what I usually do is I just put some headphones on and listen to some kind of alpha wave type of music, and I'm just meditating. And then I'm always thinking, I'm like, it hasn't helped me. Like, you can't see the difference in obviously a month, 2, 3, or even sometimes 6 months or a year. But I still keep on doing it. I don't know what it is. It's I just do it for the sake of doing it, I guess now.
Yeah.
But do you meditate? And if so, is there a kind of specific way you meditate?
Sure. So I'm a man that loves variety. I can't stick to just one method. So when I meditate, I use a number of different techniques. So sometimes I might listen to a guided meditation on an app like Calm. Yes. Sometimes I would listen to a Spotify playlist that I've put together. So I can just close my eyes and the music will carry me wherever the music carries me. Yes. Sometimes I will be in utter silence. And sometimes I will be doing a visualization, which is a different form of meditation because a visualization does not calm you, but it excites you. Yes. Because then you are projecting yourself into a future and living in that future as if it's in the present. Yes. So there are different forms of meditation I do, and often it just depends on what I feel like in that moment. But the habit is still consistent. The method can vary.
Yes. And in your book, you actually even spoke about having a menu for your exercises.
Indeed.
So I was actually just reading, I was telling Arpan about, like, should I ask Simon this question? Like, some people have life issues and they can't go to the gym and everything. And then I reached to that chapter of like, create an exercise menu. And I was like, holy crap, yeah. Sometimes you might not want to go to the gym or you can't go to the gym. Do a home workout. If you don't want to do a home workout or gym, go to swimming. And that was something really nice in that book, which I read. The one thing I want to do is that I'm going to talk about, which I face a lot, and I think many people do, is that people want to keep the energy levels high every day, have a good mood. And people with good mood, you can feel the energy as well. Sometimes life gets in the way and it hits you hard and you just wake up with bad energy or bad mood, I would say. How can someone just, is that fine, or does you can do something to wake up every day in a good mood?
Well, first of all, it is impossible to live every minute of your life in a high energetic state and in a good mood. It's impossible. We are human, which means that we will experience life across the spectrum of emotions. There will be times when you face unexpected challenges, maybe loss in your life, and you will have emotions about that. That is just part of being human. Now, the thing is, if you are aware of what you are going through, you can do something about it. You can choose your response and not let your emotions dominate how you live your day. So, for example, when someone is going through a tough patch or they are feeling particularly negative, I might share with them that exercise we did earlier about gratitude with intention. Or what I might say is you want to expose yourself into places where there are a lot of negative ions. Now, I don't often say hang around negativity, but this is the one time I will say it, because negative ions are emitted from places like rivers, forests, water, oceans, mountains, nature basically. If you can expose yourself to time around negative ions in these environments, what happens is you come back clear-headed and reset. I mean, just imagine for a moment you're going through a tough period right now, and you were to take some time out of your day to go into nature with no distractions, nothing that demands your attention, but just spend time in nature, observing, immersing, observing, and then coming back and notice what you notice.
And I think whenever I go to nature, I never knew that it kind of, there's a whole science behind it as well, but everyone always says, like, as soon as you go, even for a walk near the river or the forest, right, where we have here, it always just, there's different energy to it as well. Now, the next thing which kind of keeps coming in my head is the part of knowing too much. So sometimes I feel like, so this is kind of controversial, but I feel like poor people are happier than rich people because they know too less. Sometimes knowing too much is a problem. And when I didn't know about like kind of the spiritual side of like your purpose and everything, I feel like life was simple and then it's complicated. How can you kind of all this so much knowledge out there and so much chaos out there, kind of have a simple life which is still fulfilling and there's not too much going on in your head?
I think it comes down to living with intention. That is key. And just to talk about the rich and the poor for a moment, you can have happy rich people and depressed rich people. You can also have happy poor people and depressed poor people. So I think it's less to do with your financial situation, but it's more to do with how you respond to the cards that you have been dealt in your life. I remember meeting a cleaner in the place I used to live, and she would be singing every morning. She would be giving her to the job. She would wave hello to all the residents. And when I connected with her again a few years later, she had been promoted to manager of that company. Now, what that showed me was that yes, she came from a place where she was poor, where the only job she could get was being a cleaner. But her attitude to her position, to her setup, to the cards she had been dealt, was so different to the majority. So I think to some extent, your financial situation can be an easy excuse. I'm rich, I've got lots of problems, or I'm poor, I've got lots of problems. Well, whatever you believe is going to hold you back, it will hold you back. And so I think if we want to live with simplicity, it comes by living with intention. What is important to me? And what do I need to keep out so I can continue living the life I want to live? We as humans, we tend to overcomplicate it. We tend to overcomplicate it because we think that the answer can't be simple. Yep. The answer can't be, I just have to do this and it will work out. So we look for something more complicated. And then what happens is we pile all of this knowledge on top of us, and now we're lost as to what the way forward is. Yeah. We read this book and this philosophy and that philosophy. Then we say, wait, but he or she said that, and now he or she said something different, so now we're confused. And the thing is, knowing what works for you, and I think this is actually one of life's greatest achievements, is understanding what is your philosophy. Now, there'll be the Simon philosophy of living, there'll be your philosophy of living, there'll be my parents' way of living. But if you can begin to take bits and pieces of other people's work that resonates, and you say, well, how does that work for me? And you take those inputs, whether it's a book you read, whether it's a seminar you attended or a speech you've listened to, and you then take those influences to design your own philosophy, I think that is what matters most.
I like that. I mean, all the things you're saying is just going straight in here, and I'm it's opening another perspective in my brain about how to live life with simplicity. Because I feel like since I started my journey, in the start, everything was simple. But as you progress through the journey, there's so much coming, so much. And then you're like, oh my Lord, there is so much here that now I can't even live the simple life I used to live.
Well, I don't know who originally said this quote, but it just pops in my head now as you were speaking. And the quote goes something like this: in the beginning of every business journey, you have to say yes to everything in order to get far. But as you experience success, you then have to say no to nearly everything in order to continue with what you built.
Yes. And I think saying no is difficult, but I think it's really important as you progress through the journey as well. The knowledge you have gained, it's amazing. And did you just go through your life from leaving the job and then trying out businesses and then becoming a life coach? And if that's your journey, but how did you kind of gain all this knowledge of information? Because it's amazing.
Yeah, sure. So I think that even though I left I left the corporate world to become an entrepreneur, that wasn't the beginning of my knowledge and insight I've built. Because even when I was in my job as a financial analyst, I was still reading personal development. I was still enjoying following a lot of what was going on in the personal development world. But the fact when I made the jump, I was then able to apply that. I think that was the magic, because just reading, just listening is just theory. It's like going to a business school and getting an MBA. You've got the business degree, but unless you actually start a business, you can't put any of that into action. And so it remains just theory. And so when I was able to start putting that into action, I think that's when the wisdom started to blossom, because I was like, oh, actually, this doesn't make sense. Or actually, this makes sense. I'm going to tweak this actually, because I think if I add this understanding to what I already know, it just makes it richer. Yep. And so as I kind of applied it with my businesses, I was able to then simplify what I'd learned from my own experience. So something I'd learned already in a book, I applied it and I was able to make more sense of it. I could then articulate it in a way that anybody else could understand.
Yeah, I think that's how you're able to articulate everything in this book in such an easy way that it's easier for people to understand each and every chapter, and how you're not a topic which is so difficult to explain to people. Energy is a huge topic and it's difficult to explain and kind of make people understand. Yeah. So that's a really nice one. It was writing a book part of your kind of journey, or when it just came from the publisher, you're like, okay, yes, let's write a book?
Well, actually, writing a book and also becoming a motivational speaker were not part of the plan. And I think this speaks a lot to the fact that when you start on a path that you enjoy, that brings you happiness, it opens up lots of other different paths. So when I started, I was just focused on being a successful coach. I want to build a thriving coaching practice. I want to work with lots of people one-to-one. The more interesting, the better. But suddenly I had this opportunity to speak in public. One of my clients said to me, I really enjoy this partnership that we have going. My company is running a series of seminars for the leadership team. And I think you would be great. I think bringing you in to share some of your insights with the leadership team would be a fantastic opportunity. Me being who I am, I love a good challenge. And so I said, yes, I did it. And before I knew it, I started to get inquiries from other companies and conferences to say, Simon, could we bring you in to speak? What do you charge? How can we make you part of the program? And so suddenly speaking became something I'd never imagined I would be doing, but is now something that is where a lot of my energy is now focused into. Writing a book, it only came into my mind when I was approached by a boutique publisher. And they were interested in bringing me on board to write a book. But because the offer was win-lose, or at least it felt like win-lose to me, so win for them, lose for me, I wanted to go searching for another publisher. And I was lucky that Penguin responded. They said to me, Simon, do you want to meet for coffee? Let's chat about your ideas. Let's chat about what you have in mind. And so partly it was luck, and partly it was the universe almost working in my favor, telling me, Simon, now is the time that you should start thinking about a book. The fact that I had a boutique publisher approach me was for me a nice big sign saying, Simon, now's the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great way, because I think not having the intention, as you just said, even when you want to find a purpose, kind of links of like, you shouldn't think about doing that. It will just come naturally, and when the time comes, it will happen. You said something about leadership, and I think even in the book you mentioned about a whole chapter on leadership. So I'm going to come to you from a perspective of like a business leader. I have a team of 5 people, and being a leader, sometimes it's kind of like a responsibility which is scary, because you might not know what to guide them as and what to do as a leader, how to be a good leader, that they understand you and understand your perspective. How does one become a good leader?
The first step to becoming a good leader is learning how to serve. If you cannot serve others, you cannot be a good leader. In some of the military that I've observed, I think mainly in the UK and Europe, there is a saying that is shared a lot, and it is, to serve is to lead. And that's why serving is the first step. So what I mean by this is we can often mistake the term manager and leader. Yes. Now, just to explain the difference, anybody can manage, few can lead. Managing is simply me giving you an order. You do this by this date, otherwise you have not succeeded. Go, do the work. That is called managing. Anybody can tell someone what to do. Leading is different. Leading is the ability to empower other people to become leaders as well. Now imagine this for a moment. Imagine if you had a leader in an organization that empowered every single employee. So suddenly you had everybody from the most junior to the most senior showing up, demonstrating leadership skills. How powerful would that culture and organization be? So for me, that is what great leadership is about. First of all, it's serving. Second, it is about a leader's ability to coach. Google conducted this project in 2008 called Project Oxygen, where the question for this research was, what made great leaders? So they looked internally, they looked at all the qualitative and quantitative data, and over a period of 12 months, they arrived at the conclusion that great leaders exhibited 8 characteristics, and they ranked them in order. Number 1 was the fact that the best leaders were great coaches. Number 8 was the fact that they had great technical ability. Now, what we can immediately tell from that research is that just because you may be a great salesperson, you may be a great technology analyst, you may be a great engineer, it does not automatically make you a great leader. So the ability to coach other people to success is what makes for a great leader. And third, I think it is vulnerability. If a leader can be vulnerable with their teams, what happens is it elevates everybody around you. When I was in New York speaking at an event, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with Simon Sinek backstage. And I asked Simon, you are one of the most prominent thinkers in the leadership space. Yep. I have a talk scheduled with Salesforce, and it is about leadership. And I'm curious, while I've got you here, what would be one tip that you would give to anybody who aspires to be a better leader? And he said to me, Simon, 3 words: ask for help. Ask for help. He said, when people step into the positions of leaders, they mistakenly think they have to know everything.
Yes.
They have to be the person that solves every problem and every crisis. But he said, if you look at the likes of Steve Jobs, what he knew was that it was just as important to hire people smarter than you so you could ask them for help. And he said, if a leader can show vulnerability, it does not make them any less of a leader. It simply makes them human. Yes. And in the world that we live in, employees crave that. They crave that humanness, to know that the person that leads them is exactly like they are, that they are part of the team. There's no gap, there's no distance between where the leader is and where the employees are. So those are the 3 things I would touch on.
I like that, because I think I have some characteristics of that, but not all. And one of them is coaching. I think, how do you coach an employee, let's say someone brand new?
Sure. So I'll reference the different ways that we operate this, and this will give a good insight. So if a manager was working with an employee, they might sit down the team and I might say, okay, this is a project we've just landed, and you do this, you do that, you do this, get it done by this date, and then we'll round up and see where we are. That's managing.
Yes.
Coaching is very different, because coaching gives the power to the people you lead. So if I was running the same scenario, I might say, we've just landed this project. First of all, congratulations, everyone. Thank you so much for the work that you put in for making this happen. Now, these are the tasks. that we have to get done in order to complete this and hit the deadline. So which of you would be best suited for this first task?
Awesome.
You let them put themselves forward. Someone puts themselves forward and you say, fantastic. What do you need from us to make that happen in the time frame we need it done by? How can we help you? So what you're doing is you're supporting them and you're letting them own that journey. Great. Second task. Who's going to help us do this one? Amazing. Fantastic. So you're going to run with that. How can we help you? What are the challenges that you foresee coming up as you embark on this project? So what's happening is you're keeping an open line of communication, but you're also trusting that the people that own different parts of the project will follow through with what they're doing. And again, once you've given everybody their tasks and responsibilities, you can simply say, would it be okay 1 week before the deadline, we touch base again, just to see where we are all at? And again, if any of us need some help, if any of us are having some challenges, we can iron those out before we get too close to the deadline. Would that be okay? And then, of course, people buy into that, but they say yes because they themselves are saying, I want to be part of making this a success.
That completely makes sense, because I think I now can tell the difference between mentoring and coaching, because mentoring is like more like telling them what to do.
Yeah.
It's like managing, whereas coaching is asking them. And when you ask someone, it's they give you the answers. So they feel more inclusive as well.
Exactly. They own the process. And I think that's important, because if you don't own the process, what happens is that you can lose motivation very quickly. But if you own the process, you want to see it succeed, because this is part of your responsibility. And that's why I'm going to relate to being a parent. The reason that you want to see your children succeed as a parent is because you are part of that journey.
Yes.
When you are looking after someone else's child, yes, I mean, you still care about them, but you just won't have that same connection compared to if you own your children. If you are the parent of your child, of course, you're more invested into it. It's exactly the same with this scenario. When you own that journey, when you put your hand up and said, yes, I want to run with this, I think I can help us go over the line with this part of the project, now it becomes your baby.
Yes.
You want to see that succeed.
Yes, I was just about to say, like, how the business owner feels like the business is his baby, but by being a leader, you can make the actual employees feel like that's their baby as well. And I think that's really important. I want to touch base one part about the pandemic and how prior to the pandemic, people's energy levels were not that low compared to now. I think now it's mainly due to the fact that they work from home,
Sure,
they're alone, mental health, and just even as a business person or an entrepreneur, mentally they get drained. What was some of you didn't mention about journaling? That's just to kind of understand you, but what are some of your tips to elevate your energy levels as a entrepreneur or a person who's working a 9 to 5?
First of all, the reason a lot of people lost energy and felt drained and exhausted during the COVID pandemic is we spend too much time focused on things we cannot control. So I had friends of mine who never watched the news, suddenly were hooked on the news to see what was going on with the COVID updates. Is the economy going to open again? And so they were so caught up in that whatever they were actually wanting to do just hit the rocks. They didn't make progress. And there's lessons from that we can take for all of our lives. Is that when we spend too much time focusing on things we cannot control, we get paralyzed by overthinking and inaction. But when we focus on the things we can control, and of course there were also success stories through the COVID pandemic, but when you focus on the things that you can control, you not only feel more energized, but you feel empowered to take action. Yes. And there is always something that we can take, no matter how small, there is always some piece of action that is under our control that we can take. So I think that's one of the big lessons from the COVID pandemic that we can take away, is that there will be things you cannot control, there will be things that you can. Which of the things are you spending most of your time doing? The second is understanding that when you put your diary together, many of us will click yes to that work meeting that comes in with a calendar invite. We will click yes to that social event invite, and we will spend time booking our diary for holidays. But how often do you actually block out time in your diary for me time? How quickly are we to book that time out? And if you don't book that time out, what happens is that other people will take away that time from you. And so an easy thing that we can all do is to look at your calendar for the next month and look at periods of your week that you can just block out for you. Just you. You can do whatever you want, but you have space to explore your passions, your hobbies, your interests. The reason we say we don't have time is because we cram our diaries.
Yep.
The fact is, time is never an issue. It is always an energetic issue or a priority issue. I'll give an example. A lot of people say, I don't have time to do something. Now, if they suddenly hear a new Netflix TV series has been launched and it's the must watch, everybody's watching it and everybody's talking about it, suddenly they'll find time to watch it. Because now they've been energized by the fact that everybody's talking about it. They don't want to be left out. And now it's become a priority. So the fact is, time is never an issue. It's how are you putting together a routine and a plan so that you can focus on you. You have to focus on you at some point. You're doing it for other people, whether it's your boss, your company. But when was the last time you focused just on you?
That's really kind of deep for people to think of, because I don't think anyone ever puts me time. It's a day of going work, coming back from work, spend time with family, watch Netflix, sleep. There is never that me time, not even 10 minutes of the day. And that's really important for people to understand.
And it's so important because, you can collect all the dots you want. But if you don't give yourself the space to connect those dots, none of those dots will matter. If you look in history, the most creative breakthroughs occur when you disconnect and you just spend time being.
Yes.
And there's a difference between doing and being. We spend a lot of time doing, but not enough time being. And so if you look at some of these anecdotes like Isaac Newton, apple falls on his head, gravity. Archimedes lying in the bathtub, eureka.
Yeah.
He discovers displacement theory. Or Thomas Edison fishing with no bait, so no one, not even the fish, would disturb him. Now, I don't know if these anecdotes are true, but I think there is a lot of wisdom in the fact that they got those breakthroughs when they had me time, when they disconnected, when they allowed their mind to connect the dots they had collected. So that is why me time is important, not just for your health, but also if we want to access that creative energy inside of us all.
I think there's a book called The Psychology of Money or something, where they have mentioned about a guy who just went far away in like forest and just by himself. And that's where he got all the information and kind of knowledge he acquired. And then he came out and done something, which I don't even remember properly. But that's really interesting. Do you think it's possible to have a work-life balance?
For me, when I think about, I don't see it as a work-life balance, actually. I think that, and the reason why is that if you love what you do, if it is who you are, then you don't see it as work. If you look at the likes of, the names of like Richard Branson, Steve Jobs and the like, it looks like they're having fun and they're working all the time as well. But that's because they don't have a distinction. What they do, being an entrepreneur, is who they are. So for me, I think it is less about having a work-life balance. For me, it is having a balance when it comes to energy. And here's why, because we all have different energetic rhythms. So you might say, I'm a morning person. Someone else might say, I'm a night owl. I do my best work at night. Now, if we understand our energetic patterns, at what periods of the day do I have higher levels of energy? At what periods do I have lower levels of energy? Then we can build our routines around that. So once we build our routines around it, we bring better energetic balance into our days and weeks. So that for me is much more important than work-life balance, because I could be working 5 hours straight on something, but not feel exhausted if it's something I really enjoy.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. Towards the launch of my book, the publication, every single day, I had never worked as hard as I did, but I was never exhausted because I was so pumped for the book coming out into the world that I was calling book clubs. I was reaching out to people for endorsements. I was being interviewed on podcasts. I was just so energized. And so for me, it is much more to do with energetic balance. So if I know ahead of time that I'm going to have to commit a lot to PR and media related activities to promote the book, I'm going to clear my diary. I'm going to clear my diary for 2 months before the book launch so I can focus on the things that are going to energize me. So for me, it's much more about understanding, do I have a balance that allows me to stay as energized as possible not necessarily seeing it as a work-life balance.
Yeah.
Because for those who really love what they do, they probably won't see it as a work-life balance.
It's just life, and it's just fun for them as well.
Because work is life. Work is part of life.
That's really true. And I like how, I think this key takeaway for me right now is that I always separated work and life. But I think it's just one. Why not just make it one? And I love the part where you spoke about energy levels. And it's important to know when you feel the most energy. Now, at the same time, I do believe it's important to focus on few things, because you're limited with energy.
Yeah.
But in this world of so many shiny objects out there, how can you kind of stay focused and use your energy on one thing? And how important is it to focus your energy on few things rather than so many things?
It is very important. Well, first of all, we have this mistaken belief that in order to be better, in order to be more productive, we've got to do more. So we come across a new strategy, or we read a new book, or we come across, as you said, shiny object syndrome. Yeah. And we think, okay, I've got to add that, I've got to download that app, I've got to do this. And so what happens is you actually create more stress. Yes. When in fact, sometimes to make meaningful progress forward, you've got to eliminate things. It's actually subtracting what's going on at the moment that is not important and that does not contribute to your progress, so that you have the space and the oxygen to focus on what matters. And when we think about energy, the reason why it's better to have less things to focus on is that the more you have, the more diluted your energy will be for each of those activities. Now, if you're only focused on 1, 2, or 3 things, then guess what? Each of those will get most of your energy. The more you add to that, the less energy you're going to have for each. Yeah. And that's why it's important to think carefully about what do you want to be focusing on.
And there's also a great analogy of, like, if there are 3 plants and you have 1 jug of water, if you plant all the water in one plant, it will grow faster than growing all 3 at the same time slowly. So I think that's why I always try and cut out all the things which I don't want to focus on. But me being a young enthusiast entrepreneur, I'm always looking for ways to kind of just go do more. And I think I'm a big victim of always keeping myself busy, thinking I'm productive. But to be productive, as you said, you don't need to be working 8 or 12 hours a day. You could be productive for a few hours a day. And I think that's one thing most people are lacking, and me as well. Any tips for that? Like how you should balance your day out?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say that, going back to something I shared earlier, is you want to have me time in your diary. But also, don't get caught in the business trap. Don't get caught in the fact that you have to be doing more, or you have to be feeling busy in order to be productive. There are people who are not really working many hours in a day, but still have huge amounts of success. And what they have come to realize is that many of us live this tragic scenario of living as if we are never going to die, and then dying having never really lived. Wow. Don't forget to live life in the pursuit of what you want to achieve, which is what actually happens. Is that many of us sacrifice health in order to achieve our big goals. And then, ironically, we then have to use the success we've made, the money we've made, in order to pay for the health we now need to address. And so we cannot forget to live. I mean, we've only got one life. We've only got one life to enjoy. Yes, work is important. It is going to make up a big part of your life. But there are things in this world around us that are a miracle. There is magic around us. Time with friends, time with family, time to enjoy nature, time to enjoy what is around us in this world. Let's not forget that in the pursuit of our goals.
I think, you know what is, Simon, is the toxicness of people saying that if you're not spending your time doing something on your business or working on your side hustles, you're actually going to stay behind, you're going to lose. And I think that's due to this world of current social media and how it's being portrayed, how you need to work every single time to kind of be successful.
Definitely. And this is why it is so important to understand, what does success mean to you? And when we think about what does success mean to me, we've also got to consider the lifestyle. What is the lifestyle that you want to lead? I sure as hell know the lifestyle I want to lead isn't me being busy 24/7, especially now that I am a family man. I've got a child now. And so suddenly what's most important to me is not the hustle. Yes, I still hustle. But what is more important is being able to spend time with my family, to spend time with my daughter, to spend time with my wife. I know that at the end of my life, I am not going to look back and say, I wish I'd hustled a bit harder. Yeah. I wish I worked all night to get that project done. I'm going to look back, and I think the only regret any of us will have is I wish I spent more time with my loved ones. I wish I spent more time with the people around me that cared for me. That is often the biggest regret of many.
Yes. And when you're young, I think I'm in that place where I don't realize that the importance of that. But as I progress through life, it's important to realize that earlier than later on in life. Because I think even right now, most people don't focus on health, as you said, make healthier side hustle. And along with all the side hustles, I have definitely put health as my side hustle for this year and moving forward from here. Now, before I move on to the last question, I would just want to ask, how has your perspective changed after becoming a father as a life coach? Has that given you a whole different perspective? Even because one aspect of life can be related in business and everything.
My perspective has certainly shifted. I mean, the first place it shifted is in my appreciation for my own parents. I think that when we're young, we can give our parents a lot of trouble. But when you become parents yourself, you realize just how much they've had to deal with. And I can now empathize with them a lot. So that's the first thing, the first way that my perspective has shifted. Second, I am much more focused than I've ever been on what I call legacy virtues. Now, to define what I mean by that is that many of us, when we're young, we focus on career virtues. So career virtues are the company I work for, how much I earn, my position, my status, and my achievements. Now, those things are great. And I call them career virtues because those are the things that we put on our CV or we show off to other people. Legacy virtues are things like, what impact did I have on the lives of other people? How did I transform the people I met? What did people think when they came across my work and what I do? They're called legacy virtues because these are the things that people will remember after we have passed. Once I became a parent, legacy virtues became even more important because I know I have a limited time on this planet and that my daughter will be the individual that continues the work that I've done in who she becomes as a person. And so legacy virtues became even more important from that point. The third way that my perspective shifted, I wouldn't say shifted, but more in terms of something I was reminded of, is that when I became a parent, I got to see the miracle of life in action. I was there at the birth. I was able to hold my daughter in my arms within the first half an hour that she came out into the world. And I was simply reminded of how much of a miracle we are. The fact that you and I were born is a miracle event in itself. And I think we forget that too soon. And so I was reminded of that fact that we are a miracle. There has never been anybody like us, nor will there ever be. Because of the genetic makeup we have, our preferences, our dislikes, our likes, we are an absolute unique phenomenon. Now, the reason I share that is also because it raises a question to me, and a question I share with other people, is that once we appreciate how much a miracle we are, the question is, what are we going to do with that winning ticket of life? And if we're always asking us after that question, then we realize that there are only a small set of things that matter. Everything else is distraction.
And then that way you can focus only on the things that is important to you. And I love how your perspective in life is, and it's so like just focusing on the things you really need to focus on, and that's what makes it more important. And when you spoke about how when you become a parent, you start appreciating your parents, I felt that not becoming a parent yet, but when I was around 18 years old, I got a job at a tuition center and I was the teacher. So when I was a student, I was used to kind of talk in class and just annoy the crap out of the teacher. But when I became the teacher and I saw students annoying me and everything, I just felt like my teachers took so much on the chin. And then you start to realize like how much of a weird guy you are. Like, you shouldn't have done as a kid. But I guess I understand how exactly you must have felt. Now, my last question is, whoever reads this book, what's the one chapter you would say is your favorite of the whole chapter and that would impact the most in person's life?
Sure, I'm going to share one chapter, and if I may, also a second part of the book.
Sure.
Not necessarily a chapter, but a part of the book. So first of all, the chapter I would share, if you could only read one chapter, would be chapter 2. Okay. The reason is it is the most personal chapter, because in that I share about the loss of my mom, I share about the power of gratitude, the power of writing, but also things that we can do in this moment to change our experience of the world. Because what we come to realize is that there is no one same reality. There is customized realities. So when an event or experience occurs in your life, the way that you interpret that will be very different to someone else who went through that same event or experience. So what that tells us is that we are living in the feeling of our thinking moment to moment to moment. Now, what we bring into our thinking, we bring into our reality.
Yes.
When we're aware of that, we can literally bend, shape, and sculpt reality into something that is aligned to what we want rather than something that actually goes against what we want. So that would be the chapter I would suggest people focus on. If you wanted to focus on my favorite chapter, it would be chapter 2. The second thing to share is that one of my favorite parts of the book that I wrote was actually not even a chapter. It was the acknowledgement section. Because I'm a believer that we never get to the top alone. That I am sitting here speaking to you right now because of all the people who have played some role in my journey. Whether it has been the people who have backed me at the beginning, the people that said, Simon, we think you've got something, can we invite you to speak at this event? Even my publishers, for them to take a chance on me, to go, yeah, we want to work with you, we want to help you get your message out into the world. Those individuals have been profound in the way that they've given me the platform, they've given me the opportunity to share what I do.
Incredible. Thank you very much for that. And I love the part about you where you said, I think I've used the phrase I love the part, because everything you're saying is just going right in the head and it's making sense. The part where you can create, you bend your reality and create your reality. Because people always, it's so common sense, but people forget that your reality is created by you and you are the creator of your reality.
And I think that's something many of us forget too soon. We are giving up our paintbrush to someone else.
Yes.
But we can take back control of that paintbrush at any point. And if we think of our thoughts as colors, you can choose to paint your canvas with bright, vivid colors of positivity, or you can choose to paint it with dull, negative colors. That is your choice. But too many of us give up the control of that brush to someone else. And then we complain about what's on the canvas. But if we take back control of that brush and we choose what to paint that with, that is when we begin to take responsibility for where we are and where we want to be.
That was the perfect way to come to the end of this podcast and how nicely you said it. Everyone listening to the podcast or watching the podcast, firstly, get this book because it's definitely going to be one of my top 10s. As when I started reading it, I even told the boys and the team, I'm like, you guys need to start reading. We'll get each copy for them as well. We already got one copy for our friend. And you can find Simon on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube as well with the same or the links will be in the description so you can go, or in the podcast notes. But once again, thank you so much, Simon, for joining. And it was a pleasure to have you and share your knowledge with the world.
Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you.